Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Grant Dyer. I head up customer success here at Orah. Quick note, today we're talking with two people who manage running safety and attendance at boarding schools. Running safety and attendance at boarding schools is a lot different of a challenge than a day school. Students are moving between classes, residences, activities, off-campus locations all day and night. Knowing where everyone isn't just operational, it's duty of care. Today, this isn't a polished case study or a demo. I just want to have a really honest conversation with the people actually doing the work every day. So with us today, we have Jessica Liu from the Ross School and Jim Barbaric from Andrews Osborne Academy. Thank you both for making the time for this. I know pulling an hour out of a boarding school schedule isn't nothing, so I appreciate it. Quick housekeeping before I pass this over to Alexis from our customer success team. This runs about 40 minutes, so we'll have 30 minutes of conversation, and then we'll have time at the end for 10 minutes of a live Q&A. So throughout this, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box as you go. You don't have to wait till the end. I'll keep an eye on everything, and then I'll work your questions in throughout. So let's just get right into it. Let's start with Jessica. Can you just tell everyone your name, your role, a bit about Ross School and how long you've been with Orah?
Hello, my name is Jessica. I'm from Russ School, which is a day and boarding school over in the Hamptons. We've been using Aura for about 3 years, with me managing it for about the past two.
Great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jessica. And Jim, I know you've been with Orah a long time, so I'll let you talk about that experience really quick.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jim Barbridge. I work at Andrews Osborne Academy just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. We are a preschool through post-grad day and boarding school with a lot of international students. We started using Aura actually when it was boardingware over 9 years ago. And based on different changes in leadership, we've used it more or less frequently. But the last 4 years, we've been using it for almost all aspects of our boarding life and our day students as well.
Amazing. Great. Thanks, Jim. I'll hand things over to Alexis, who's going to walk us through this with Jessica and Jim for the next little while. And don't forget, keep your questions in the queue. I'll answer what I can and then pass it over to Alexis near the end of the call. So over to you, Alexis.
Thanks, Grant. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited and happy to see some familiar names in the chat. Jessica and Jim, I'm curious if you can talk to everyone about what Aura looked like, sorry, before Aura, what your typical day-to-day looked like of managing student safety and locations. What was the process? How did it feel internally?
Jessica, do you want to go first?
Sure. For this question, it's very important to understand that Ross is not necessarily your traditional campus. We have our main campus in East Hampton, and our boarding houses are approximately a 15-minute drive away instead of being on the campus itself. So prior to Aura, boarding houses were mostly run by house parents and managed in person, pen and paper sign out sheets, like a family home or a homestay model, with the Res Life support team to oversee operations.
For us, I've been at Andrews Osborne now for 20 years. And up until 2017, it was like Jessica said, it was all paper, pencil. House parents were in charge of making sure where students were. All emergency drills and everything were done with paper and pencil and just jotting names down. In 2018, we went into starting to use boardingware and the precursor to Aura. And then we used that similar to how we do it now. And then we had another leadership change and went back to instead of paper and pencil, we went to Google Sheets. So there was a little bit more live interactivity between it. But again, that was not, it was scary. It was honestly scary. And the feeling since I've been here, before we used boardingware and now Aura, was that we're just guessing. There's
Mm.
no certainty, especially for any sort of administrator, that at any given point in time, they can't look to see where everyone is. It's hoping that things don't go wrong and just wishing that everyone is where they're supposed to be and that house parents are being accountable for all the students.
Thank you, Jim. I think you answered my next question, but I was wondering if there's a specific moment that made it really clear that the old process wasn't cutting it.
Yeah, I can speak to that too. It
Yeah.
was actually our newest head of school. This is his fourth year here now. And during his first week or so, he had used Aura at his previous school in Connecticut. And he came here during the first week. And when one of our leadership meetings said, "All right, tell me where everyone is." And you just saw people looking around the room. Our res life director was just looking down at his notebook, and we couldn't give him an answer.
Mm.
And he was like, "That's unacceptable. We need to know where students are at any time, not just for our accountability issues with what we need to report to the state and all of that piece, but it's just a safety issue. That what if something happened here?" And actually, 2 weeks after that, we had a tornado that hit very close to here. So it was a real life emergency can happen. And if we can't account for all of the students, we're not doing our duty of care.
Jessica, is there a specific moment that really made you also realize that your old process wasn't cutting it?
Not necessarily a specific moment, but our current residential life director, Jeff Dion, had experience with apps such as Aura at other boarding schools, and he came to Ross and immediately wanted to start implementing some sort of structure and wanting to use it. For me, even though we were already using Aura by the time I was hired, there were aspects such as long break plans, which were still being done in Google Sheets, and I would look at that sheet template, and parts of it would be incomplete because students didn't have flight tickets or they didn't know where they were going until very last minute. And using Aura's events feature, we were able to streamline that much more in advance, have them upload tickets, be able to communicate with families if there were any bottlenecks in between. And it's been really helpful.
That's so great to hear. I think both of you really touched on the fact that prior to Aura, there were multiple systems. And so looking into different places. And so that's one of the benefits to having Aura. So when you first brought on Aura, there's obviously going to be some onboarding and a rollout. I'm curious if you could walk us through the first few weeks and what surprised you with rolling it out in either direction.
Yeah, the biggest surprise for me was actually some of the hesitancy of people that had been here, of especially with house parents, of this system works. We've been doing this. There's never been a problem. And they had to learn a new tool. That was the biggest hesitancy that we had, I think, with regards to the boarding piece of it. But our rollout, we did a soft open in the spring before we really rolled it out full time and started introducing piece by piece to our house parents, to teachers, because we also use it, or now for all of our day student attendance and field trips and all of that too. And then slowly built a handbook for our school that worked really well for our specific unique situation. And then fall came, and then we did more PD through that. But it was really, I was surprised the hesitancy of some people wanting to move to current technology.
What was the hesitancy around, do you think?
I think it's part of it is we have multiple platforms that we use for different things. So we're a Blackbaud school for our school information system and grading. We have Magnus for our health forms, got Power School for curriculum. And I think part of it was adding a new system to it. And people were just kind of technology overwhelmed at the time. The other thing I think people didn't really realize the liability or the concern of if it's working, don't fix it type of thing. That we didn't have a problem before. Why do we need to do something new? And when we explained that the original way that we did things really wasn't a secure way to do it, there was a little bit more buy-in to that. But I think the fatigue was too much technology to start.
Do you have
Gotcha.
any advice for schools where they might have some tech adverse folks on the team?
Yeah, I would say as much as, and when you start doing training for your faculty and staff, if you can set aside time for really small groups. So we start, actually, that was, I would say, one of the things that did not work well for us. We did it to our opening meetings and we had, I don't know, 50, 60 people in the room and started walking through all the different pieces and this is how it works and this is what we're going to do. And you had half of them just tuning out. And then you had another group who may not be the strongest or tech savvy group of people that were overwhelmed. And then another section was perfectly fine. So I would say in rolling out this as a new program, try to go with really small groups as much as you can that have very specific similarities. So maybe just house parents, security, and any other people that are along your security lines, coaches as another group. But if you can keep it to small groups, and then answer individual questions and make it kind of this partnership in adopting it, then I think that would have gone better for us if we had done it that way.
Jessica, do you have any tips for rolling out to new faculty every year? I know that new and returning faculty, it's something that takes place every single year for every school. So how do you roll it out to your new staff?
So it's a similar thing. There's always a bit of a learning curve, but I found that there's generally a positive reception because when you're explaining that you're trying to help streamline a process, you're trying to make things easier for the team. And most of residential life and usually ends up being thankful for having these tools. I would say for training, just be patient, be prepared to teach certain features more than once as your staff gets comfortable with it. And it also helps to have internal discussions when you're about to change pass settings, being open to feedback and thoughts.
That's great advice. Thanks, Jessica. Now that it's fully rolled out with all your staff, let's say in the school year, what does your day-to-day look like? Like, how are you using Aura every day?
So pretty much we use it from students waking up till they go to bed,
Yep.
different aspects. The first thing that we do every morning here is a morning wake for our boarding students. So house parents go through, wake each student up, get eyes on them to make sure that they're awake. Doesn't mean that they're not going to fall back asleep, but at least we have one set of eyes on them and we do a roll with that. Students then go from our residential houses. Fortunately, we don't have to drive 15 minutes, but they walk across kind of a grass area and then they'll tile in using the NFCs to the dining hall. And then we use it throughout the day with our class attendance as well. And that's a little bit different where our local young students, teachers do all the attendance, middle school, we're transitioning, and then our upper school, they actually tile in to all of their classes. And then once the school day ends, this is where it really becomes the most important for us is that wherever students are, we have them using passes unless they're where they're supposed to be. If they're in their houses or getting tutoring or something in the academic buildings. But if they're at an athletic event, we take advantage of using passes. If they're going out to see a friend, we make sure that parents approve that if they're leaving campus, and then we schedule the pass and they can tile out for that. But anytime that they're leaving campus or they're somewhere on campus that's not their traditional schedule, we take advantage of the passes. And then at night, we have a study hall where they also get a roll check or fee for a roll check. Some other unique things throughout the day, or maybe not so unique, but some other places where we use this are health center. We're using this for students to check into the health center if they're going to be there anytime, and that kind of works to make sure that they're not marked absent for classes. Especially our boarding students, we don't allow them to stay in the dorms. If they're sick throughout the day, they have to stay in our health center. So they're not getting marked absent or tardy if they're in our health center. We use pastorals for any sort of behavioral issue, any sort of significant medical concern or attendance concern. And we use events for the weekend activities. And then I guess the last thing that we're getting ready to incorporate, which we have not done for our boarding students, is the medication logs. Those still are paper and pencil right now. And we're in the process of transitioning into using that with Orah.
Jessica, how about you? What does your day-to-day look like?
All right. So our day-to-day, Aura is integrated into all of boarding life, really. From when students wake up, we don't wake our students, but they are expected to catch a bus at 6:50 a.m. Some of them will accidentally sleep in, but they are expected to catch the bus. And they get on the bus, they come to campus, and every building on campus has an NFC tile. And we run an automated roll for the morning where the students are expected, and they know they're expected, to tap in with their phone on the NFC tile and then hand their phone in the morning. From there, at about 8:30 a.m., I get the results of the roll. Any student who is not accounted for or absent, I will send an email out to faculty who will then send that student to the main office to our iPad kiosk to tap in manually. We use it for pastorals. Similarly, we'll document anything that happens from any major incident to student did a great job with chores. And that gives administration very easy access to whatever happens in boarding, and it allows them to follow up with anything that requires a follow-up. Throughout the school day, we still use Blackbaud for class attendance, but once 3 p.m. hits and the students get their phones back, they'll want to start going to town or going to other places. They might have a sports practice, and anything that's not in class is a pass, essentially. So they'll make a sports pass for a game, they'll make all sorts of different passes. Some of them require parent approvals, some of them will require an extra host endorsement. Most of them have to be approved by their house parents first. And we monitor those pass requests and make sure we know where everyone is going until about 4:45 p.m., where we have a face-to-face dinner check-in, and that's a staff-initiated role. So a student will come to dinner, they'll just say hi, and then we mark them present. Sometimes students will have a sports practice and forget to make a pass, and then we're able to see that, we're able to follow up. But in general, they're pretty good about making their passes and tapping in so that we know where they are. We also use all of this data. The nice thing about Orah is that whenever all of this happens throughout the school day, there's a log essentially where we can view a history. And all of this data feeds into what we call house reports, which is essentially a boarding report card and a little snapshot of what a student is like outside of classes, how they are doing in boarding, how they're doing socially, and it gives parents a much needed update. It gives them an insight that their child is cared for, that we know what their child is doing, and that they get some insights into what their child is like at school while they're away, like possibly in a different country overseas.
That's amazing. Thanks, Jessica. You touched on some things that I would love to hear from both of you. So one thing about Orah is that it's so customizable and you can fit it into so many different categories of day-to-day life. And so I'm curious, what are some of the passes that you've created? What are some of the pastorals? How you use pastorals specifically? Any advice for other boarding schools on what they could be doing?
Yeah, the one of the big things that we've used with the customization part of it is workflows and reports, where we do our duty logs through that every evening. So each house parent has to fill out a series of things if anything major happened or just all's good tonight type of thing. And we've customized a workflow and a report that automatically gets sent out, and then that gets sent to our residential life director, who gets a summary of everything. So that was really nice to have that piece all put together, and then the email summary is great with that. In terms of the passes, we try to keep it as few as possible. And really, we have only one pass that we use for our day students. And that's it for them. Basically, just they're not going to be here today for whatever reason. But for our boarding students, most of the passes then deal specifically with any sort of activity that they're going on the weekend, which we use the events for that. We use the kind of travel to campus at the beginning of the year, or during breaks, we use passes for that. And then we've kept it pretty general with regards to anything that's just in our really small downtown, that area, whatever they're doing there, just an off-campus pass there, and then any sort of athletic pass.
Thanks, Jim. Jessica, do you have any customizations?
Plenty. Because our boarding houses are so far away from the main campus, I am quite specific with our pass setup. I can even share a screen and show a little bit. So we have a variety of passes. Just this past year, our students have made 1,593 requests, including event passes, and a few different types. We have different passes for weekend trips, sports, after school on Friday, and weekend events. We have about 15 just student submitted passes, and the rest are handled through events. And they're specific because with housing off campus, we need to know different specific scenarios for late night pickups and school events. So, for example, a spring musical, would be a pass for performers, but if there are students wanting to watch the spring musical, they'd sign up on an event. So we have two different numbers. Maybe the musical performers need to get to campus earlier in order to do a final dress rehearsal. So we'll have the numbers for that and the separate shuttle numbers when we drive them. And see, we have events are largely used for our fun weekend activities, our outside campus, just our weekend shuttles, any city trips, or our American Dream Mall trip. It's very popular with our students. We've seen most of them, students can just sign up. We also use our events for long break passes. Those are student-informed events, and we use them for our airport shuttle signups as well. It's also very helpful to have dashboard and reports you see I have this set up as like a KPI, so I can see like month to month, year to year, how many events students are signing up for. Was there a particular month that was very successful? What events did we run that month? And it's always good feedback to have.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, Jessica, I love this report. How difficult was this for you to make?
Took about 10 minutes this morning.
Okay. And overall, it looks like it's a very detailed report.
Yeah.
Dinner check-in times tab. This is great.
Yeah, so these are what I was talking about with our automated roles. How many roles in total have run over the past school year? How many times a student has successfully checked in? What our percentages are like? And it's a lot of fun with both students and staff alike to turn this into a competition where you go into your tags or your filters and you can say, look at this house. This is the percentage for this house. How does that compare to your house? Who's winning?
Yeah, you kind of shared that with me when I visited your campus. Can you talk a little bit about how you run that competition or how you take these different groups of students and turn it into a competitive nature?
Yeah, usually towards the end of the year. It started as something we wanted to do for our seniors. So it started as an overview. Look at all these places you've gone. Look at all these events you've participated in during your time here. Look at everything you've done at this school. And it was a nice little handout and graphic for our seniors specifically. And we did something similar with the house parents. And of course, when you give someone their own stats, they want to see how others are doing in comparison. So it just started spiraling into a competition. And what I like to do, especially with my students, is when we run weekly house meetings. And at our very last house meeting, I like to just project this screen onto a TV or whatever. And I like to just show my students what our tapping in rate and our dinner roll rates are. And also just show them that we are tracking this and we have all of the numbers for everything they've done throughout the school year. And they really get a kick out of it. I have tags even for girl houses versus boy houses. And they really like to see that as well. Are we doing better than the boys? And gives them more incentive to be following the rules as well in subsequent years.
It's brilliant. I love that. A good friendly competition.
Good friendly
Well,
competition.
Alexis, we have a question here that I think would be useful to explain now. The question is just, can you explain what pastoral really means? And I guess in terms of duty of care, what that means at Orah.
So pastorals are a way to track any note regarding a student. So it can range in any category. It can be around behavior, it can be around academics, it can be around medical information. So you have the ability to customize the different categories. I always recommend for a boarding school with pastorals, you have your behavioral infractions, but you also have your medical piece. So you can log when a student has a concussion and put them on a watch list. So a watch list feature adds a little icon to the bottom of the student's little tile. And that allows everyone to know that the student's now on concussion watch. You should bring them meals, limit screen time, just check in on them more. Or you can also change the different category type. There's a school down in Texas. They have created a pastoral category for the student's health insurance card. And so what they did is they logged it into a pastoral note and attached it as a file, and then it has the student's ID number on it and kept it as a watch list. So if you're on the go in a rush, you can quickly pull up the pastoral right then and there because it's attached to the student's profile, and then at the hospital, take a screenshot and then send it in.
The great thing about those is you can make them sensitive too. There's certain things that we only share with maybe our health team and then not
Hmm.
everyone else, just to keep that documentation going, or all staff can see it. And you can also filter if that pastoral gets sent to the families and the
Right.
students as well, or if it's just a private note that you're just documenting.
We use
Yeah.
pastorals very heavily at Ross. See here, it's 1,080 in the past school year. We have just a couple of categories. We do a similar thing where any infractions are a pastoral, an academic concern might be a pastoral. We have general notes, which can range from incidents to student likes playing this video game or just little things. Medical for any of those. Merit, then that would be like the student was a great friend to another student today. The student was very helpful, volunteered. The student did a great job with chores is a big one. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just provides a really helpful way to document. Whenever we end a duty shift, we'll have on the activity feed an end of day report, just a sort of post, and then anything significant that happens is also a pastoral attached to that report. And of course, it's configured similarly to what Jim was talking about with our email summaries going to admin.
One more note about pastorals is that you're able to customize who can actually see them too. So
Yeah.
going off of Jim's point of saying it's sensitive, maybe the record's not sensitive, but an overall category of behavioral infractions, anyone can create the note, but only maybe Jim and Jessica have access to view that note. So,
And it's nice to see that you can set up a pastoral dashboard as well, or a workflow, even to see if a student has an X amount of discipline pastorals in a certain amount of time, you can flag that and get ahead of that as a concern. We have about 25 pastorals per student, with our largest number being 112 pastorals on a single student. So,
mhm. Perfect. Now I'd love to go into the Q&A. There's a few in the chat that I can see. So Jason wrote, would you recommend when rolling out to address people going rogue and doing workarounds and then putting things in Aura at a later time? What do you recommend?
That's a really good question. I would say our biggest issue, and I know every time I talk with Emily about concerns that we have, it's the rogue people that don't follow procedures. And so it's not the system where the problems are, it's the people sometimes that are using that system. Yeah, I we don't really we just on a it's a case by case basis of in terms of attendance for most of the time we actually have an alert that goes out if they haven't submitted their
mhm.
attendance within an X amount of time. I think we have 10 minutes after when it's supposed to be done. Then they automatically get an alert. If they're not doing their duty logs at night and
Mm.
you wake up in the morning and get that email summary with zero logs submitted for whatever houses are, all we've been doing right now is do it as a case by case basis and pull that person aside and say, this is what happened. This is what we need you to do. Do you have any questions on training? And we found for a couple people where they weren't following what we wanted them to do was because they didn't understand the system as well and they just needed a little bit of extra support. But yeah, we always handled it just individually.
Thanks, Jim. Another question for either of you is how do you address kids who don't use the NFC tiles, or if you either have a no phone policy or the students don't have a phone?
For us, we actually use them throughout the day. And depending on the level of student, I know this is mostly about boarding, but for our academic day, our really young kids, the teachers do all their attendance. For our middle school, it's kind of a hybrid system. And then for our upper school kids, we have them using the NFCs. We do have a handful of students that either have a phone, their phone breaks, or they might have a really old model of a phone that doesn't have an NFC reader. So we've investigated going into the QR scanning with that, although we're not at that point yet. But really, as long as it's not a technology issue where we can loan them something that will allow them to do that. If it's more of a behavioral issue, then that becomes the pastoral. After we first, as first, the first time is always a reminder. Oh, we noticed you didn't do this. But then after that, we start to document them not doing it, and then there will become consequences with it.
We mostly use workflows to track and document whenever document patterns if a student isn't tapping in or if a student isn't checking in at dinner roll call a certain number of times a week. And from there, we do look at it a bit case by case. Is if it's not a technological issue, if it's behavioral, then there will be certain number of consequences, and that changes with repeated offenses. Could be a detention, could be a gating. It depends.
Thank you. A question from Alexander. If you were to start with one feature to roll out, what would you recommend?
I think for us, the most important part of it is the emergency roll. And I know we didn't talk much about that, but in the event of any sort of emergency, being able to get an exact tally of where students are, and the more features that you add to it and that you incorporate, the more helpful that emergency roll becomes. So if a student's on a pass, you know where that student is. You don't have to worry about tracking that student down. Or you can set up those emergency rolls where students can check in that they're safe if they're not physically there wherever you're rallying around. But for us, that was the most important part was those emergency rolls.
Jim and Jessica, this actually ties nicely into another question from Chris. What are your emergency protocols and security as far as doors, ID badges, and drills are concerned?
It depends on the event. We're in a location right now where we do get tornadoes from time to time. Of course, we always have to drill for fires, any sort of active emergency or threat on campus. So each one kind of changes the procedures for this. But the first thing that happens, regardless of whatever the emergency is going to be, whether it's a drill or a real emergency, is to activate the emergency roll on Orah. So we've trained all of our staff and faculty, unless that person is in imminent, if they're in a room that's on fire, get out of that room, but then activate Orah. But automatically activating that, and we have our emergency drill set up so that the appropriate people get notified for that particular event. So like for a tornado, anyone on campus gets notified, our boarding students, and then the directions are get underground for that. So we have it pre-populated so it saves a person time in terms of once they activate it, all they have to do is just hit start, and then everything that we want set up goes out for that. The secondary part to that with doors and all of that, we have a different system that we use for that. Another tech system with phones where they have to scan in to open doors and close. But I know there are integrations that can help with some of the security pieces too, that we just don't tend to use those here. Yeah.
We handle on-campus emergency drills a little differently than boarding because our day students are not on Orah. So on campus, we have ID badges that we'll have to swipe in to each building. And our drills on campus are mostly pen and paper. We have our own system during the day. But in boarding, we run about four drills in a year, mostly fire drills. And they're also pre-populated and they're set up as emergency rolls on Orah. So from there, we activate an emergency roll and everyone is notified and everyone is able to run the fire drill according to the process and document it.
One more question on emergencies from Chris. With an emergency on campus, how does the communication for non-resident students and faculty get accomplished?
So for faculty, all faculty are part of our emergencies, whether they are boarding or non-boarding. They always get alerted to any sort of drill or emergency that's happening at any time. And we actually use the communication tool that is in the emergency role. So whether you're on a computer or a phone, there's a little like a speech bubble icon that's at the top that allows you to send messages to faculty and staff during the emergencies. So that's how we keep open lines of communication. We actually, at the start of this past school year, we were communicating through Google Chat, and then doing attendance and all the other pieces through Aura. And it was just too many things all at once. The one thing we did have to train our staff to with that communication piece was to remind them this is for emergency and important information only. You don't need to say, I'm not on campus in that chat because it clutters the whole kind of log of what becomes valuable information for everyone to know. But staff communication happened through that tool on Aura. Student communication, a little bit different. And it was really only if we didn't know where a student was. If it was like a day student and there was an emergency or a drill at night, they were never notified about that. That only happened to the boarding population. But if we did need to communicate, we would see who was missing or we would contact that student directly with someone with a phone. They would just call.
We're a fairly small school, so when a drill happens on campus, our faculty are notified. We do have the Rave Panic button as an option that will ping all of our faculty and staff in the event of an emergency if activated. And we're able to mostly just lead and direct the students to wherever the designated location we're meeting is. And we have checklists distributed during the day for where to account for all of our students.
Thanks, Jessica. Another question that I can answer for Cheryl is, do faculty check into Aura in an emergency, or is it only for students? So the great thing about emergencies on Aura is that you can also account for staff during that emergency. So as a staff member, I can go in and select that I am safe, even if I'm not present for the role, and letting everyone know that I get notified that it's going off right now, the fire alarm. And so then I can say I'm safe. But if I am on campus, I can also mark other staff members as safe too. So you'll see a full list of all your staff right next to your students, and then you can mark them as accounted for or not.
And the same is also true if you use the integration we have with Visitor Aware, so your visitors can also be accounted for.
The great thing about that too is for Ohio, we have to do specific reporting on any sort of drills or emergencies that we have. So you can go back on past rolls and look at the log, and that will tell you the total number of people that checked in, the time that it took for that drill or that emergency. So you can go back and do any sort of mandated reporting if you need to with it.
Yeah. Another question that I can answer is from Chris. How does it integrate with the SIS, and what systems does it integrate with? So we have a two-way sync with Veracross and Blackbaud. So any changes that happen in Veracross and Blackbaud and Fax, sorry. So any changes you make over there, we push over to Aura. Any changes to contacts, student schedules, students' email addresses, it's all going to get pushed over within a 24-hour sync. That usually takes place in the middle of the night. However, any passes that are created for students that you would like to push over to your SIS, that gets pushed over at max 15 minutes. So we've seen it as fast as 5 minutes, it can go up to 15. But so all your passes, all attendance records are going to be pushed over there. I'm looking at some other questions. Another question from Jason would be, looking back at your rollout, what would you do differently now knowing what you know?
For us was to roll it out in smaller groups and pick based off of the role of those individual people. But instead of doing it one big thing, definitely groups of 10 or less.
I would say something similar. I would say to have the team more involved in any sort of discussion if we're changing any feature or making sure they're comfortable with it and they're able to use it consistently with all of their students so that we have a unified front when we're using Aura and we're implementing these features. And I would say to do the training in smaller groups, one even setting out times for one-on-one sessions if someone needs the extra time, and just being patient and being open to feedback, like I said before.
I know we're a little over on time now, and there's still a few questions left in the chat, so we can answer those questions and send them out to you later on. But I just really want to thank Jessica and Jim for taking the time today to answer all of your questions and give their insight into how Aura is working for their boarding program. So thank you both so much for coming today. And thank you to everyone who is in the webinar as well. It was great to see all of you here too.
Yes, Jessica and Jim, thank you both again. This is exactly the kind of honest conversation we wanted to have today, a real version of what this work actually looks like. We appreciate you giving us your time and your candor. And as Alexa said, thank you to everyone who joined us today live or watching the recording later. If you want to keep up with what we're doing, head to Orah.com. There's a bunch of upcoming webinars that we have planned. We've got more of these conversations. So thank you, everyone, again. Anyone with left questions we didn't get to answer, we'll definitely get those answers to you after this webinar. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.